What if you could tap into the same source of knowledge and wisdom that fueled history's greatest geniuses like Einstein, Charles Darwin, and Da Vinci? You might be surprised to learn that many of these brilliant minds attributed their greatest insights not to textbooks and lectures, but to a deep connection with the natural world. Take Einstein, for example. He was famously known for his long walks in nature, claiming it was during moments of quiet contemplation outside that his most groundbreaking ideas would strike. He even went so far as to say that if you could just look deeply into nature, you would understand everything. But what was Einstein actually seeing in nature that most of us miss? On the surface, it would be easy to think that world-changing genius abilities just comes down to being born different. But a growing body of research suggests that nature really does play a much more active role in shaping our cognitive abilities than we ever realized before. Just look at this study where researchers found that immersing groups of adults in nature led to a massive 47% increase in creative problem-solving abilities. That's a huge gain for nothing other than spending a few days hiking in the woods. And just imagine what this kind of intelligence gain could do for your own creative thinking. These studies are interesting for sure, but they're still just numbers on a page, and what really fascinates me is how these numbers translate into the lived experience of real people who changed the world. How did geniuses like Einstein actually use nature to fuel their unique discoveries and insight? So I dug a little deeper, and it turns out geniuses like Einstein and Da Vinci weren't just taking random strolls in the park. They had a formula, a three-step process to unlock the genius-boosting power of nature. The thing is, from the outside, it might look like these geniuses were simply relaxing, enjoying the fresh air, and letting their minds wander. But if we look a bit closer, there's something much deeper happening with how they train their minds in nature. Leonardo da Vinci is a great example. All you have to do is take one look at Leonardo's notebooks, and it becomes instantly apparent this man had a very unique relationship with nature. His journals are overflowing with meticulous observations of the natural world. Page after page is filled with detailed sketches of plants, animals, and natural patterns. And for Leonardo, this wasn't just a hobby. It was an entire philosophy that pervaded every aspect of his life and work, because Da Vinci believed, similar to Einstein, that observing nature was the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. He was a constant champion of first-hand experience, believing that true understanding comes from direct engagement with seeing, hearing, and sensing the natural world. Which brings us to step one: geniuses tune their sensory awareness with nature. Most people approach nature with an extremely low quality of awareness. Sure, their eyes might be momentarily caught by a soaring bird or a vibrant flower, but these moments of focused attention are usually quite brief and superficial. On the other hand, when you really stop and start to observe nature in a higher quality way, it's amazing how stimulating this complex interaction of natural sights and sounds can be for the human brain. I mean, think about it. A huge part of what your brain is designed to do is take in sensory data and process it into meaning. This is why you have parts of your brain dedicated to different types of sensory processing. This might sound incredibly simple, but when was the last time you put conscious effort into exercising your sensory brain in a truly focused and sustained way? To actually watch a bird for longer than 5 or 10 seconds, or deeply study the patterns of lines moving through the petals and leaves on a plant. We walk around with these incredible tools of perception, but the truth is that most people only ever use a tiny fraction of what their senses are truly capable of doing. Geniuses like Leonardo da Vinci, whether by conscious choice or some subtle intuition, understood the power of their sensory brain, and they recognized that by consciously engaging their senses in natural environments, they were not only experiencing the world more fully, but also stimulating the parts of themselves responsible for learning, memory, creativity, and insight. The best part is you don't actually need to be a genius in order to start exercising your sensory brain in this way. All you really need to do is go outside and practice sustaining your attention in a sensory environment. So when Leonardo went for walks in nature, he didn't just stare at the ground in front of himself and get lost in thought. Instead, he practiced being present to what he was seeing, hearing, and sensing in nature, and whenever something caught his attention, he pushed himself to study it deeper, to listen listen more carefully and try to understand what the deeper pattern is. Doing this for even just 15 minutes a day on a routine basis, it's pretty amazing how quickly your capacity for sensory processing can start to expand and develop into new perceptions and insights. But here's the thing, simply observing the natural world isn't enough. If all you do is develop your senses, it still doesn't guarantee that you actually transform those observations into meaningful patterns, connections, and breakthroughs. So how do geniuses actually leverage their sensory observations into world-changing discoveries and insights? This brings us on to step 2. Geniuses activate their tracker's mind. The human brain has evolved over millions of years to become a highly intelligent problem-solving machine. But have you ever considered how humans developed this ability in the first place? If we go back far enough, we find the early roots of complex human intelligence in the primitive art of tracking. The ability to hunt by directly following animal signs was a way of life for hundreds of thousands of years. This ensured the most nutrient-rich food supply for our ancestors, but also had profound implications for how our brains evolved towards specific types of cognitive tasks. And have you ever seen a true Paleolithic-style tracker in action? It's absolutely amazing what they're capable of doing with highly refined sensory awareness and complex reasoning.
Tracks have disappeared. Karoe tries to put himself into the mind of the kudu, and himself reenacts the moment when it heard him approaching as it tried to rest in the shade. He deduces the direction in which it must have fled.
It may seem primitive, but this Bushman tracker is demonstrating an incredibly old yet sophisticated way of using the sensory brain in combination with abstract reasoning and prediction. It takes tens of thousands of hours to develop these skills at the highest level, and this is the environment where the human brain evolved. Because here's the thing, humans evolved to be genius-level trackers. And tracking is really just about engaging your analytical brain, looking for patterns, making deductions, testing your theories, and drawing conclusions. If you think about it, we're all still trackers today, but instead of tracking bull kudu on the plains of Africa, we track bugs in computer code, and we track anomalies of light and energy at the distant reaches of the known universe. But even more than that, tracking is a primal evolutionary mechanism in the human brain that teaches us how to think and learn from direct observation and analysis. So how do we actually trigger this mechanism in our own neurobiology? Well, it all starts with asking really good questions. One of the best examples of someone who made an absolutely genius discovery just by asking really good questions was Charles Darwin, a deeply inquisitive naturalist who honed his observation skills from a young age by constantly asking questions about nature. What plant is this? What bird is that? What are these insects? These might sound like simple questions, but when you first start learning a complex system like nature, even simple questions can take a fair bit of investigation and critical thinking to confidently solve. We also have to remember that Darwin would have still been a child when he first started developing his questioning skills through direct observation of nature. And this is actually very similar to how the Kalahari Bushmen teach their own children how to track. Instead of just giving away all the answers, they start by gathering the kids around a tracking mystery and asking them questions like, who made this track? Which direction did it come from? Was it alone or with others? This is an extremely effective way to learn because you have to actually engage your brain to think about the question and gather evidence to find an answer. It's kind of like a primitive version of the Socratic method, where it's not just about memorizing facts, it's about sharpening minds in a way that lines up with our evolutionary history. And by starting with a foundation of easy questions first, it builds the capacity to start working on more complicated questions. So when Darwin grew up and began his famous sea voyage to explore new ecosystems around the world, his questioning mind was already primed to start tracking much more sophisticated mysteries, like what is the core diet of birds and animals on this island? How is this different from other similar yet distinct ecosystems? And is the isolated diet of this ecosystem actually affecting the unique bone structures of animals living here? These questions made it possible for Darwin to document some of the first quantifiable evidence for how different species evolved on Earth by tracking how finches in isolated island environments had unique adaptations matching the food sources resources only available on those particular islands. But the real genius is no matter how deep Darwin went with his studies, he always knew there was more to learn. He never stopped finding new and more nuanced ways to ask questions. This constant drive to ask questions and find answers is really what enables geniuses to leverage the full intelligence of our evolutionary history as trackers and start applying it to modern problems. It's not about having all the answers, it's about activating a relentless pursuit of knowledge that leads to new discoveries, new insights, and an ever deeper understanding of the world. Everything we've discussed so far is important, but there's still something missing that, in my opinion, is the main reason nature helps to draw out genius discoveries in so many of history's most revolutionary thinkers. Which takes us on to step 3. Geniuses use nature to expand their consciousness. For starters, let's look at how Einstein incorporated nature into his daily work routines. Einstein was known for being almost obsessive about taking long contemplative walks in nature, where he'd walk and observe the beautiful surroundings, work on ideas, and find inspiration in the natural world. On a very basic level, we could say that Einstein just had a really good sense for the value of giving your mind a rest from challenging problems. We've all had moments when we got stuck on a problem and no matter how hard we tried, just couldn't find the solution. This is an indicator that your mind is stuck in an unproductive line of thinking. But the challenge is, when we don't see results, this often causes people to push harder, to focus even more, which just digs them deeper into that mental rut. So geniuses like Einstein understand that sometimes no matter how hard you try, you just can't solve a problem with pure logic. And what you really need is an entirely new paradigm, a new way of thinking about things. This is where taking a break to go and lose yourself in a quiet and peaceful setting can help you step out of that overactive, analytical mind and give your thinking circuits a much needed rest. Even more interesting is, for someone who wasn't at all religious in the traditional sense, Einstein spent a huge amount of time marveling in awe and reverence for the beauty and interconnectedness of natural systems. He even talked about experiencing a cosmic religious feeling. This might sound a bit esoteric, but it actually makes a lot of sense when we consider what happens in the human brain during states of awe and wonder. Think about the experience of standing under a vast starry sky, or watching a beautiful blue dawn over a still lake. These moments of calm alertness actually evoke a shift in consciousness that moves us from our logical, linear cognitive brain state into a more expansive, whole brain meditative state that is much more creative and intuitive. Most people only experience awe and wonder on rare occasions, but Einstein would actively seek out these experiences on a daily basis by cultivating a calm, contemplative state in the presence of natural beauty. But the real key is by prioritizing daily moments of heartfelt mental clarity and connection to something greater, Einstein gave himself a much looser grip on his frames of reference about reality. These are like mental filters operating in the back of your mind and includes all the underlying beliefs and assumptions you make about what's true, what's important, what's right, what's wrong, what you believe is possible, even who you are at a core level. Typically, these frames of reference stay pretty much the same throughout your life because we take for granted that what seems real is truth. But the reality is that you can be the smartest, most analytical thinker in the world, but if your mind is operating on faulty assumptions and old ideas, you're never going to discover anything truly new. Einstein understood that by connecting to the amazing, intelligent complexity that's constantly unfolding in nature, he was able to move beyond his own limited perspective and experience the possibilities of a different reality. This is how Einstein was able to see perspectives on reality that were light years ahead of everyone else at the time, and how Darwin was able to see the truth of evolution at a time when anything other than creationism was ruthlessly demonized by most of society. And Da Vinci was able to conceptualize inventions that wouldn't be fully realized until centuries after he passed away. One thing we know for sure is true genius doesn't just come down to being born special. It's also about how you develop and cultivate your evolutionary hardware left over from millions of years surviving in the wild. And who knows, maybe a little time in nature is just the thing you need to reach that next breakthrough in your own unique genius. If you want more ideas about how to do that, I'll link to another video here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.